Hi everyone, welcome to Bakin Shakin with Washington Red Raspberries. We're honored to partner with the Washington Red Raspberry Commission on this class series to demonstrate various applications of frozen red raspberry formats for industry professionals like you and, well, like us. I'm Zach Miller. I'm the Baking and Pastry Arts Instructor here at the New Orleans Culinary and Hospitality Institute, or NOCI for short. I am joined today by Chef Becnel of Petite Sophie Patisserie. Today's session is focused on Viennoiserie, breakfast pastry, lamination. We have very fortunate to have a master of it. I've watched him get ready for this. I'm as excited about this as you guys are. But before we get started, let's take a look at the story behind Washington red raspberries, which make up 90% of the nation's red raspberry crop.
My dad started this farm in '77. We grew up running around in the berry fields, and raspberries run deep in our veins.
You just have to deal with what Mother Nature gives you every year, and every year is different.
I'm passionate about doing the best job that we can to get a prime berry to share with the world.
All right, thank you, Mary. I have, if you want to, we'll pan down here and we can see some of the other formats that you guys have received that some of them we'll be using today. So we've got in the front, we've got the whole IQF frozen. We're going to be using those today in which one of your products?
In the cooling them on, we're going to do it. We're going to put it, the frozen, it's going to be semi-thawed, and we're going to put it in the middle. And then we're also going to do, with the pastry cream, you could either use any of the three of these, the broken, the whole, or the puree. I mean, you would just do it by weight. And then I'm probably not going to use the powder. I'm going to use the broken just to put it on top of the snails.
All right. So like you said, we have the whole and broken mixed here, which would be great. You said, I mean, you saw the substitutes. We talk about the substitutes a little bit later. It's just kind of personal preference. So the puree, obviously, you're not going to have the texture. You have a lot of the intense flavor from it. But you get the whole and broken. You get the seeds and the pieces, the pulp in there. So you get that texture in there if that's something you'd like. Also, we have the seedless red raspberry puree. We have the dehydrated fragments and the dehydrated powder. Those are the ones we'll be using today. And if I didn't do a good enough job earlier introducing our guest chef here, it's Jeff Becnel. Really, it's born and raised here. We'll talk a little bit more about you and in your shop here as we go through. But really very excited watching him set up. So I'm going to really at this point get out of his way and let him do his thing as we go through. So I'm going to get these out of the way here, and then he'll start. Let him take it away.
We're going to kind of go backwards today. I'm going to start with the cooking first, and then I'm going to go right into the lamination. Just because it's such a process and it takes so long. I mean, these have been proofing since I took them out at 11 o'clock in my shop and drove them over here. So these have been proofing for quite a while.
Just let it run.
Just showing that you don't need a proofer to proof up really nice croissants. We've gotten a whole lot of really good luck with doing them in the shop from just putting plastic wrap on top and putting them in our on a speed rack. So now I'm going to egg wash them, and I'm going to egg wash all the flat surfaces. I'm not going to egg wash where the layers are, because if you on the side pieces, if you egg wash right there, it's going to not allow the layers to look so nice. And as you see, I got a thin brush. It's about 1 inch wide, so it's going to make it really easy to go through and egg wash.
So, Chef, you definitely want to go really slow with this as you're doing your proofing on this, the final proofing.
You really don't want it to go a whole lot above 71. If it's room temp and it's like 74 or something like that, that's okay. But if you proof it in a proof box that gets up to like 80 degrees, that butter is just going to melt right out of it. And it's not going to be as nice a product. You're not going to have those beautiful layers. And you're going to be just mad at yourself because you spent all that time making those beautiful layers and you just, destroyed them.
So patience is key, huh?
Don't be afraid to let it take time. Like if you're doing you're starting with a small amount, what I do is I just take plastic wrap. Once I've done shaping them, and I just allow them to proof with the plastic wrap. And then if you look at the two, the regular croissants, I cook them at about 375 for about, I'd say about 18 minutes, 17, 18 minutes, and I don't open the oven. If you open the oven at this point, they're just gonna completely collapse. So what you do is for 17 to 18 minutes, and then you turn your oven down to about, I'd say about 330 after that, and finish it for another 8 minutes. That's the regular croissants, and then these snails are gonna be at 340 for 20 minutes. And then I'm gonna turn it down to 325 for an extra 5 minutes at the end. And then we'll glaze them and we'll put them back in the oven very briefly just to get the glaze to be more sticky. And then as you see with the snails as well, these have a raspberry pastry cream inside and craisins. And just like on the other ones, I'm trying not to paint the brush on the layered side so that you can see them all nice and pretty. And then I will also, I'm gonna bring right close to here so you guys can see it, the cooling them on so you can get an idea. We've made all of these from croissant dough, which isn't really typical, but it's just showing you how nice the stuff you can get just from a really nice croissant dough and how versatile it is. And you can see the red for the raspberries. And then I'm just gonna take the rolling cart and we're gonna go right in the oven with them.
Now, Chef, those raspberries, did you kind of tuck those in as you were folding them together?
Yeah, I separated the layers and I just put them in between. I got 2 whole raspberries in each cooling them on that has it, so it's 4 of them have the raspberries and the rest don't. All right. And then we're just going off to the oven with it.
So sorry, we've got a big pastry lab, so it's kind of hard to kind of pan all the way over to the oven. So he made the long walk over. So I don't know if we can try and pan it all the way over there. You can kind of see the size of our baking lab here at Noki, and the big screen with you guys on it too, so we can see your chats and stuff. So we're loading it into our ovens now. So we are very fortunate to have a big, beautiful pastry lab here. But in a case like this, it's kind of hard to film everything at one time. But a really nice touch inside of the Queen Amman. That's going to be a really, I think, beautiful product. I can't wait to try it with that raspberry tucked inside. So,
All right, so the first thing we're going to do after this.
So we're just got some of our student helpers here keeping an eye on things for
and
us.
The butter's going to be right after that.
So.
All right, now we're going to go right into lamination.
So right on.
Sorry, let me just give me a second. Let me get set up so I'm ready for it. All righty. And I think that's it.
And I think you're all plugged in with that, Chef. So.
Okay. Oh. Let me just set my watch so we know that we're not overcooking them. Okay, if you look at this, I'm using ice packs. We're not blessed like they are at the Noki to have a blast chiller. So I just use a freezer. And then when I want to retard my doughs really well, like this one right here, I just go with ice packs. Just leave that one in there. Thank you. And as you see,
that's a great trick.
yeah, it works really well. And as you see, when I put my doughs that I'm going to laminate, rectangle. You want to start with a rectangle. It's going to be rectangular. Why not just start in the very beginning with a rectangle? It's like if you're doing origami, I mean, why would you start with a circle paper? It just doesn't make sense. So we're going to do rectangular dough, and then the same thing with the butter is going to be rectangular. But the first step that I'm going to do, so we've made this dough. If you look at it, first you make the poulouche, and then you put it in a warm place for 30 minutes, and then you go ahead and mix the whole dough. And that whole dough is mixed for 16 minutes just so that it really develops the elasticity of it. And we're going to talk about that in the end. We're going to go back and talk about the dough. So if you have any questions that need to be clarified, we're going to do that. So now that I'm going to take this and I'm going to make it the size of a sheet pan. Let's see. So for me, whenever I'm doing lamination, it might seem trivial or maybe a little OCD, but I like to have everything ready for myself. So I have a sheet tray with 2 pieces of parchment on the bottom and 1 piece of parchment on the top. In a few minutes, you'll see exactly why I'm doing that. Okay, so I like to be very exact with the stuff that I'm doing. So I'm going to take this. It's going to be 14 inches wide by about 24 inches long, which is, you know, a sheet pan is 26 or 25 by 16, so it's going to fit in a sheet pan. And that's kind of how I like to do everything, so it's really standard and it's easy to work with. So I'm getting the flour on there. And when I'm sheeting things, I always want to work on the width first. You don't want to try to do the length and then you have this long thing and it won't fit. It just won't fit through the sheeter. So then I have my ruler is all ready to go. And this is a little bit different than the sheeter we have in the shop. This one is Doyen. The first time I've ever used one of these. I have a Rondo in the shop, and it's just, I really like that thing. Okay. Then. There.
We've been playing with this earlier. There's a little bit of a learning curve on when you're using a different piece of equipment. So.
Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and measure the width of it. So I'm about 13 inches, so I need to go a little bit more. So I'm just going to find that next notch and just take it to it. And for me, in my shop, I'm used to measuring everything on the left side. I tend to like to do everything on the left side, so I'm standing on that side. It's just out of habit. If you like being on the left side, go for it. That's okay. So now it's at 14 inches, so I'm going to turn it sideways. And as you can see, from when we had it in there retarding, it hasn't risen at all. So by the time that we get to the point where we've done with lamination and we're ready to have them proof and be cooked just like we're doing over there, this is going to be, the yeast is not going to be dead. It's going to be really fresh, and you're going to get a really nice poof on there. So if you look at it, I can tell just by looking, and I know the length of the arm of the sheeter. The one we have in the shop is about 25 inches. This one I think is closer to 28 to 30. So now we're going to go right into the sheet pan over here. Depending on the size, because this is a 3-time dough, and every single recipe makes whatever you're making, whether it's couignon, croissants, snails. If you're going to do pain au chocolat, it makes 14 in this recipe. And if I was going for a 4-time recipe, it would be closer to the edge. I would make it really big, and I would have more butter. So then, if you look at it, the reason why that I keep the paper is, okay, this is going to be here, and then because this is just going from left to right, not going the width, I'm taking one piece of paper and sliding it to this edge, and the other one to this edge, and so you're not going to form a skin on the dough, and that's really important. So then we're going to just take this, and we're going to go right back in the fridge with it so it doesn't proof, and we need the butter. And then with the butter, I'm going to show you a trick that we use in the shop. Instead of pounding the butter, I was getting tennis elbow really bad because I still pound couignon butter. Ours is a little bit different than this recipe, but the sheeter is so much stronger than anything I could do, and I was doing so much doughs that it just made sense. So you always want that to have the name facing you. That's the smoothest side. And so now I have the butter. So I'm taking the sticks, I've cut them in half beforehand. And I'm going to make 3 rows of 3. And as you're going to see me, I'm going to offset them. And so that there's no weak point going all the way through the butter. And it's going to stay nice and strong. And when I'm ready to use it and bend it, it's not going to just crack on me. And if you see right here, I have 2 butters that are facing up like this, and if I put it through the sheeter, what's going to happen is it's going to push all the other butters out. So I want it to be as flat as possible. And we will see with this, I know with my sheeter I can go down at much smaller increments. This one at a certain point you can't go down as slowly. So what I may have to do is you may see me bring it to this table and start pounding it with my pounding pin. If I do, just know that's the process that I like to use is this. But I mean, just like I'm sure most of you have learned, the old school way of just pounding the butter, and that works just as well. So in the end, I'm gonna try to get this butter. It's gonna be around 12 to 13 inches. You'll see once I go back and do it. And then I'm gonna fold it over itself, so it's gonna be a really nice rectangle. It's probably gonna be like, maybe, I'd say probably not as wide as this. It may be like 12 inches by 14 inches is gonna be the final size of that butter. So now I'm gonna take it to its widest point at 30. So that's 30 centimeters, I believe, when you do rondo. And, all right. So now I'm putting it through. And you don't want it to go all the way over the end, because then all your butter won't be stuck on where you had it. So just be mindful of that. Okay. And as you can see, the butter's already doing it. So, whoop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of my rolling pins, and while it's still here, I'm just going to pound it a little bit, just so that it's soft and it's not going to get caught, because you can see a really high point right here. That's getting caught in the sheeter. And the thing is when you're pounding, you want that pin to be hitting that butter very parallel to the table. You don't want it to be hitting at an angle, because then you're going to have this side's going to be really high and that side's going to be really low. And that's the beauty of the sheeter. It just does it so even for you. All right. So now I think this will work. But if we do have problems again, I may have to pound it again, but that's all right. Okay. So on the rondo, when I'm doing the butter, I only do it to the thickness of 9, so I believe that's 9 centimeters, and I think it's on the same as this one. We'll see how it goes. All right, once again, a little butter issue. So I'm just going to pound this little piece by itself real quick, and then it'll go right back in and everything will be fine. All right. And you'll see, as you get closer to 9, all of this butter is going to connect. It's going to be one thing. All right, so we're almost at 10. All right. Okay.
It's those pesky safety features, right, Chef?
Yeah. My machine is a little bit older than this, so it doesn't have quite so many safety features. I can feel like I can just roll, but I think, too, I'm not used to this machine is the biggest thing. All right. So then, if you look at the butter now, if you see it, it's starting to come together. I'm basically at probably 10 centimeters right now. I need to take it down one more just so that it all connects, and then you'll see what I do to make a full block. Okay. Okay, so now I'm going to take it back right here. And so we have this, and you're probably asking, so all right, Chef, what do you do with this? So for me, I like to use the same tools all the time. And if you ever watch me, if you ever come in the shop and you're there while I'm doing lamination, you'll see every step that I do it exactly the same. And you can see the sill pad is starting to stretch, and it's causing it to break. So what I'm going to do is I took that side off, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it back over and peel it off on that side and lift it slightly just to push it all back together. It's not complete exact science. Okay, and so then I have this short one, is really good. It's a mat for the ones that they make I find are the best. because they're so small. If you use the typical one that's made in America, if you look at the two, they're so wide, it's hard to get things flat. You'll see how useful this thing is in a second. All right. So I just took all the butter off of that one, and I'm going to use it to fill in the gaps right here. Okay, so now I'm going to fill in these 3 gaps, here, here, and here. Okay? And then you just go back with the little pieces, and when there's a crack or something like that, you just take that one and go over the top of it and fill it in. And then on this side, because it's got 2 flaps and it's got 2 holes over here, I'm going to take this one, and this one's going to fit over here. So once again, I've got some gaps, so you're just going to fill it in. And that's the nice thing about my sheeter is because it goes so slow, the butter tends not to break up. You can put it down 1 notch at a time, 1 centimeter at a time, whereas this one, there's certain points where you can't. Okay, so now I'm going to flatten all of this out. And then I'm going to turn it to the side, and I'm going to take off this edge right here, just to get it nice and square. I don't like messing with things that aren't really nice and square. If we spent all that time making that dough into a rectangle, why would we want to use a butter that's not as rectangle as that dough? So that's what we're looking for right here. We're going for a really nice rectangle. And the best I've ever heard somebody talk about it is it's like folding origami. You want to have really nice and crisp, clean edges when you're folding origami, and it's the same thing with lamination. Okay, so now I'm taking it and making it twice as thick, and I'm going to take the rolling pin and I'm going to roll it just to smoosh out all the air and connect it together. Okay? Then I'm just going to fill in those gaps, and then underneath here there's going to be gaps underneath that I'm going to fill in with that butter that we have right here. All right, and at this point, I'm going to knead that dough back that we just put in the fridge. So I'm just going back and making it as nice of a block of butter. Believe it or not, in France, you can buy butter like this. You don't have to make your blocks of butter, but it's really expensive to buy it like that in the States. Okay. So then I've got all my edges really nice and clean, crisp. Okay. Then we're going to go back here, and this is where the lamination is going to start. And this is one of the beauties of, you'll see the sill pad is like, got to be like my best friend in this thing. I mean, I have a couple of tools that I really like, but man, that sill pad makes your life easy. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the sheeter. Okay, I'm going to flip it over. The dough's feeling kind of sticky, so I think I'm going to have to put some flour on there. The last thing you want to do is allow that dough to get really sticky and send it through your sheeter, because what's going to happen is these, if you look at the guards that they have, the scrapers they call them, if the dough's rolling over and it gets really sticky, it'll go down with the belt and it'll tear a huge section of croissant off. And once you do that, you've tried so hard to do nice lamination, and just because you didn't put flour on there, you're going to kick yourself. I've done that a few times and been like, oh man, Jeff, what were you doing? Okay, so now I have the brush. That's one of the other things you just brush it off. You don't have to worry about leaving that flour on there. That's going to make it dry. So now I'm going to invert it on there and peel it off. And just like before, I'm going to scrape that sill pad with the butter. And I'm going to fill in those gaps right here. Okay. You're probably going to ask me or think to yourself, why do I have a gap here and a gap here? You will see in a few minutes. I'm not used to doing this size recipe. Generally, I max out my machine by putting in, it's a 6-time recipe that fits on my machine exactly. So it's twice the size of this. And when I do it, it's exactly 16 inches wide and it's 25 inches long. So now what we're going to do is we're going to sheet it with the dough underneath, the butter on top, and the sill pad on top so that the butter doesn't get stuck in the rolling pin. Okay? Then we're going to start at the highest point. Well, my machine's 30. This one goes way up. That's not necessary. That's the croissants. So just give me 1 second. Oh. Alrighty. Temp. This one just needs to go down to 330.
330.
330 for like 7 minutes. This one's still got 5 minutes. So I still got 5 minutes on that one, about 3 minutes.
You're on your way down to 330.
Okay, that's fine. And that one's, well, I'll put 2 more minutes after this for that. And this one is, they're looking great. Those ovens are awesome.
Cool.
Okay, sorry about that. Because it's such a short class that we've got to pack everything as much as we can into this class so that you can see the full lamination. All right, so now we're going at 30. And on my rondo, I like to take it 2 notches down every time. This one, it's not exactly like that. I just take it down to the next notch that I possibly can on here. And so I'm going to go back for the width of this. I'm going to go for 14 inches. If you were doing a bigger one, you would be going for the width of your machine. You'd be going for like 16 inches is generally a rondo's width. Okay, so now we're going to take the, everything's got to be measured. I know you're probably going to get tired of seeing me with the ruler, but everything I do uses the ruler, and you'll see why. All right, so this is at 12 inches. We need to get it to 14. Okay. So I think we're probably about 13 now. Okay. So we're at 13, and I still have that butter over there that's going to help me fill in the gaps. Okay. So I'm going right back to that sill pad, taking off that butter. And then look, I still have those 2 pieces that I didn't have. This is where we're going to use it. Okay. And you'll see I'm just making it square again. Because rolling it through there with the sill pad on top, it can't stay square because the dough on the bottom isn't quite the same texture yet as the butter. And that's what we're shooting for here. When you're doing lamination, if you want to get really nice layers, you want the texture of the dough and the texture of the butter to be as close as possible. That's why we retard the dough, and then we run the dough through the butter through the sheeter to get it to like that same point. And if you were to come check this out, they're about the same. I put about the same pressure on there and made about the same mark. That's really important when doing lamination. And in the beginning, you're not going to be able to tell right away if you've done good lamination. When you're done with it, and you cut it, you'll be able to see it. It'll be like the rings of a tree. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the edge, and I'll cut the edge over here, and you'll see what I'm going to do with it. And I'll tell you why. If you guys just remember to ask me why I'm doing this later, I'll explain it to you. That's croissants already come out. Just regular croissants already.
Got it.
And then that other one is ready to go down to 325. Dude, Zach, give those another 3 minutes. I just think they need to dry out a little bit more. Okay, so now I'm going to take it and I'm going to connect those 2. You see we have these nice straight edges. And I'm just connecting them. This isn't completely 100% necessary, but I don't like my lamination to open up. Okay, then I'm going to go back to my rolling pin. And at this point, I might have a little bit of air in there, so what I'm doing is I'm going back and I'm squeezing out the air in the edges. Okay, so if you look at the width we have, we're at 14, just like we said. So I'm going to turn it sideways now. We've already got our width. Now we're going to go for our length. Okay? I'm going to start back at around 30, I would say. Got to remember all the safety. And I just go through and I'm going to just start cranking it down all the way. I'd say to about 9 centimeters is going to be the thickness. It's a 9 on a rondo sheeter. So we're going to do a single turn with this. We're right about 9 now. You can see how long it is. So I'm just going to let it go just a little bit more. 6, 7, 8. It's really hard to tell on this machine what exact number is, but I think this is going to be closer to where I want it. And typically what I do, because my sheeter is on the table, and I let it roll out into a 10-foot table just like this, so I would have my dough right here and I'd fold it. But I'm going to do it right here this time, because instead of keep on switching back and forth, I don't think it makes sense. So I'm going to dust it off. You don't want that flour in the inside. And I'm going to show you a trick that I use. My daughter got this in a I don't know if you can see it. My daughter got this little bitty rolling pin in a set. And I kind of commandeered it until I bought her another one. And it's a great way to manipulate your dough while it's in the sheeter. So what I'm going to do is, I don't know if you can see it from there, but the two edges, this edge is bulge and this edge is bulge, and there's almost like a valley in the middle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll those two edges. I'm going to roll them to the middle. So now it's going to be basically the same thickness. So when it goes through the sheeter next time, it's not going to deform. Okay? So then this one, I'm just going to pull it out a little bit. So we're just doing a single turn. So the single turn is in thirds, right? It's not quite long enough, so I'm going to shorten it up just a wee bit.
Regular croissants, Chef?
Yeah. Then the other ones, I need to put 5 minutes on the other ones, and those will be done.
5 on the others?
Yeah. All right. So now we have the regular croissants are coming out. You really need to make sure that you get enough darkness on there for a couple of reasons. And one of the reasons is if you do not get them brown enough, they're going to absolutely collapse, and in the inside, they're going to be hollow. You want to show it to them?
Yeah.
So Zach's going to go ahead and show you what it is. You can see why.
I'll come to you, Patrick.
Why we've kind of gotten known for lamination. It's those layers.
We'll get the close-up.
Sideways, you can really see the layers well. And it's also key with proofing. I do these for 5 hours, and I do them at room temperature. If you underproof them or you overproof them, the center is going to collapse. So it's really touchy. And if you guys have any issues with proofing, just get in touch with the guys at Noki and ask them to get in touch with me, and I can help you walk through the problems that you're having. Okay, so we did the first turn. That was one turn. We're doing 3 turns. So I'm going to do the first 2 turns without stopping. And then after the first 2 turns, I'm going to put it into a freezer or a blast chiller, and it's going to help me speed up the process. And the gluten, because of the butter in there, the gluten isn't going to pull back as hard. So if you put it in the fridge and you get it cold enough, it'll help you bypass that. All right, let's see. So now we're going back to 30, so we're going the thickest on a typical rondo. So I've turned it with the, if you'll see me doing lamination, I always do the seam downward first, and then when I turn it sideways, I flip it as well, so that it gets even pressure on either side so that you don't have any slippage. Now we're at about 9, so I'm going to take it down one more notch, and we're going to give it one more fold. As you can see, I'm still not used to this machine. All right. Now I'm going to fold it again. I'm actually going to put it on the table because this is the last fold before I put it in the fridge. I'm going to do it so you guys can see it. Okay. So this is how I typically do. I roll it all the way out on my table. And I'm going to straighten up the edges. This is really important parts. And I didn't flip it when I did it because I'm not used to working in this space right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the whole thing and flip it. Okay. Then I'm going to dust it. And if you look at it, you want all your lines to be nice and even. This isn't even right here. If you look at it, there's a dip in there. So I'm going to take, I don't know where I put the, there it is, the little rolling pin. Sorry. And I'm going to straighten it all out. Okay. Now we're going to go in thirds again. Okay. And as I'm doing it, I'm being really mindful of my layers. I don't want one to go under the other, so I'm doing it nice and exact. And if you see how I'm doing it, it's like folding a piece of paper. It's still really square. And at this point, I'm going to take my rolling pin again, squeeze out the air. Okay. Then we're going to take this. And this is what I do. A lot of people at this point will wrap it in plastic wrap and put it in their freezer. Well, if you think about if you're doing that every day with how many times you're doing croissants, you'd be using an insane amount of plastic wrap. So what I do is I use parchment, put in there to keep it from getting a skin. And as you can see, I'm just tucking each corner around. And this is where the second piece of parchment comes in. So this one's going to be on this edge, going long ways, and I'm just tucking it under. Then for me in my shop, I put it right in the freezer right now. So I take another sheet pan just to weigh it down, and this goes on the top of my freezer. But we have a blast chiller today, so I'm going to use it. Okay. Mind grabbing that red liquid in there? The red liquid. So now we've got raspberry glaze going on this. I'm going to go wash the brush really quick. But when it comes out, we're going to put some raspberry glaze. Is it looking dark enough? The Kouign-Amann stays in, but the snails don't.
I think they look pretty good. I'll let you be the
Kouign-Amann.
judge.
Snails look great. So Kouign-Amann needs probably another, let's say, 5 to 6 minutes. Just rinse that for me really good because it's got egg on there still. Okay, so now you're going to go back and you're going to see the finishing of the snails. Thank you, Zach. Go on here so you're not burning the table. Okay. You can see the nice layers. It's collapsing a little bit in the middle, but that's because of the pastry cream. There's not much you can do about it, but I guarantee it's still going to be delicious. So now we're just going to glaze it with that raspberry. It's really nice and red. It almost looks like grenadine, but it's not. It's just from the raspberries. Thank you, sir. All right, so now we're just going to glaze it. So it's going to give it that final little pop of raspberry flavor, and it's going to give it a little bit of color.
Now, what raspberry product did you use to make your glaze, chef?
That was the pieces of frozen,
Okay.
and I treated them. I let them thaw, and I treated them as if they were whole raspberries, as if they were fresh whole raspberries. Because that's when I first did the recipe and I developed this for it was that. But I mean, there's a whole lot of different snails that we've done. We did one with Satsuma pastry cream and golden raisins and a Satsuma glaze, and there's a couple of other variations we've done. I'd really like to go and do a traditional one. So right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of this. It's going to stick to that glaze, hopefully. So you're going to get a little bit of that crunch, and it's going to be that vibrant, you know, sourness a little bit, and you're going to get the sweetness of the raspberry. and it's going to accentuate the whole thing. Then we're just going to put it in the, right back in the oven, I'd say for like 2 minutes, just long enough for that glaze to get nice and sticky. You don't want to just sog out the whole thing. Okay. Thanks. Okay. Cool, Mom, it's really close.
Flip them here.
Let's give it like 2 minutes. I'm gonna put that on my watch.
Got it.
Okay, so we've got the cooling them on, getting ready to come out. We're gonna give it 2 minutes, and I'll take them out right here so you can see them. But as you see, we're kind of going backwards. Now, when you're doing your lamination, it's a thing of touch. You want it to get more firm, and you don't want the dough to be so soft. So it's one of those things that you're just going to have to get used to doing on a daily basis. I'm so used to doing them so much, I can just touch the croissants, and I know, hey, this has gotten stiffer. The butter's a little bit stiffer. It's made the whole dough a little bit stiffer, and it's not so stiff that the butter's going to shatter. And that's, you're kind of like sitting on that fence. We're going to check it really quick. So we're going to stop it first, check it, or just open? Not quite. Just for time's sake, we're going to go with it. All right. It's not exactly where I want it, but I think I can deal with it. And what I like to do is in between, while I'm going back to doing that last turn, I'm going to put these pans right back in the blast chiller so that it stays really cold, and it's going to really retard that dough really fast next time. Yes, sir. All right, so then the same thing. I'm going to make sure my edges are nice and clean. I'm going to put this seam is going to go on the bottom. So I'm going to flip it. Okay. Now, once again, we're going for that 14-inch width.
So your seam in the bottom shift, it means like the double layer is going to be on top?
Where you folded it.
Where you folded it's going to be on the bottom?
Yep. That outside thing is going to be on the bottom first, and then when we turn it, and we're going to flip it completely over again so that this side and this side gets as much rolling. A lot of times if you're not doing that, this bottom flap right here is going to roll underneath, and it's going to be like that underneath, and you really don't want that. Okay. Now we're going to go back to 30. Now I need my ruler again. Okay, so we're at 13. So I'm going to go down just one more notch. Looks like it's about that width. Oh. All right, so now it's pretty much at 14 right now. So I'm going to take it and flip it. Yeah, let's do that. So let's see, Zach. You want to get another rack, and we'll just put it there, and we'll put this right there, and I'll show them how I'm taking it off real quick.
You got it.
All right, I'm going to hurry up and do this fold really quick. And as you saw, I rolled it to the edge of the table so I don't have to pick this up and reset the whole thing. So now I'm going to take it down to 9 again. And as you see, that seam is on the top now.
Chef, would you like this right on that other rack?
Yes, put it on that rack right there. Thank you. Thanks, Zach. Appreciate it.
Behind you.
Okay, now we're like at 15 now, so I've still got to take it down to 9. We're almost 12, 10, then 9. And then I'm going to stop it on this edge because I can see this is slipping right here, and I want it to be nice and straight. You'll lose too much layers when you do that if you let it just come too far out. Now we're going to go ahead. I'm not going to take it on the table. I'm just going to fold it in thirds. Okay. And just be mindful of those layers every time. Okay. Then we're going to go right back in those frozen pans. We're going to go right in there. Just put it right on top of the rack. Thank you. Okay, then I'm going to just go ahead one more time. Is just going to wrap it with the parchment paper. Okay, so once again, we got the 2 on the bottom, and we're just going to go put it around, put it around. Okay, then we're going to go right back in the blast chiller. This time, maybe we can leave it in a little bit longer. Sir. All right. Now there's a trick with doing these if you want to do them fast. I'll tell you, but you've got to have hands that can take heat. If you grab them on the corners if you take the middle of your hand and you put it on there and you try to grab it, you're going to burn the heck out of yourself. But if you just take the corners and you go relatively fast, you can do it. And you have basically about 3 minutes to get them out of the ring, or you'll have to put it right back in the oven because that caramel will stick to the rings. And you can see it's really nice caramelization on the bottom. It's really nice and even. We could have let these proof just a little bit more, but I think all in all it came out for a kouign-amann made with croissant dough. I think this is almost as good as you're going to get. And don't feel like it's a lesser product. I was up almost all night last night trying to get this final bit finished on the kouign-amann so that they could be really nice. And I'll talk to you about what I did with the amount of yeast and what kind of yeast I used at the end. So then you can see them. You really want to let them cool, but you can see the raspberries. I don't know if you can see it. You can see the red in there. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Now we're looking at time right now for me. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to hurry up and show you guys the lamination, the final lamination of kouign-amann really quick. Hopefully at this point in time, I've done the sheeter enough where I feel comfortable with it, because once I get going, I can go pretty fast. All right, let's see. So once again, this sill pad I only use for putting sugar on kouign-amann. If you look at it frayed on the edges, that's graphite. You don't want to cook with that. Doing sheeting with sugar so it doesn't get all in your machine is perfectly fine. So this is going to be a single time recipe of that dough. And if you look at the yeast on there, for kouign-amann, unlike croissants, you cannot use instant yeast. It does not work as well. So for kouign-amann, with me, I have had really bad luck with that. Even with golden yeast, with all kind of other yeast, I've had bad luck. The one that works the best for me is fresh yeast. It's just going old school. So then now I'm going to take this, I'm going to roll it a little bit further, and then I'm going to do lamination here again with the sugar. So I'm going to think it's going to be about 20 right here. Let's see. And I'm going to try to push it kind of fast. So just, if you have any questions, you can call me or get in touch with Noki and see if you can't get in touch with me, and I'll walk you through. I mean, there's a very stepped out process that I use, and I do the same thing every time. I don't change.
Chef, I've seen people use brown sugar or even sugar in the raw for this as well. What are your thoughts on that?
For me, this is my issue, because if you look at the process of the way that I do the dough, because I do this really long fermentation, I've developed enough flavor right there that it doesn't make sense for me to use anything other than sugar. Because the other thing is you want to bring that caramelization as far as you can to get that brownness. A lot of people are scared to get it that brown, but what you're going to do is you're going to develop the flavor. So for me, it's these two things. It's the long fermentation in the fridge that I use, and it's the browning in the oven. And that's, for me, why I don't like to use it. But I mean, other people are going to have different references and points of views. Okay, so I brought it to 9, and that's about where I'm going to do it, 9 centimeters. So then I'm going to give it, with the sugar, we're going to do that fold. And it's a little bit weird at this point because we don't have our full width set. And so because this does 14 kouign-amann, I'm going to want it, for every kouign-amann is going to basically be 4 by 4 inches. And you'll see the little bicycle that I have around here behind me. This is a little bit wider. Another reason why I like to keep around this one is it's got a little ruler on there, so now it's at 4 inches. So I want it to be a little bit wider than this when I'm doing my, I don't know if you can see it. It's a little bit narrower than 2 of these. Okay, so now we're going to do, okay. And then I'm going to get ready to flip it over, so I've got to make sure that the sugar is all straight on here. Now I'm going to give it a flip. So once again, I've got that seam underneath. I'm not going to go that long on it because I'd like to continue that width to only be the width of 2 of these. So I'm just going to go a little bit further than that. Let's see. So then my ruler. Okay, so we're at 10 right now. So I think we've gone a little bit further than what I really like it to be. So we're going to turn it. So I'm going to flip it over. Now we're going to go this way. And I'm going to bring it down to 9, and I'm going to try to really move on this because I've still got one more thing of sugar to go in.
Now, Chef, do you measure the amount of sugar you put in there, or you just
Yes.
kind of know it?
We're going to talk about it at the end as well.
Okay.
I'm going to tell you about how much sugar I'm putting in every recipe. It's all weighed out. I don't like to do anything just by, smidges and dashes, and I don't like doing any of that stuff. I don't like to guess. Because consistency for me is what we've made our name on, and if I'm doing that, my consistency is not going to ever be there. So I want, when somebody comes in the shop in 2 years from now, I want them to still come in and be like, man, that's the same exact thing that I had that day. I mean, for me, I put my little girl's name, my daughter's name on this business. So you know what? I'm invested. I'm not doing anything halfway. Okay. So now we're just going to straighten those edges up. That's where I need my little pin, wherever I put it. All right, I'll just take a big pin. That'll be all right. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to straighten these edges up. And at this point, you don't want this dough to control you. You're the one in control, so you've got to be able to do different things, figure out different things to make it work. And if you see the way that I'm rolling it, I've learned all of these things just from doing it on a daily basis. Okay, now we're going with the sugar again. For this one, it's a single-time recipe. It's 230 grams of sugar 2 times. And of course, it's not all going to get in there. If you look at me using the sheet, or some of it's falling here and there, and that's perfectly okay. That's been figured into this amount. Okay. Then once again, I've got to take all this sugar and spread it out so we don't get a broken kouign-amann. Okay. Now I'm going to take that sugar and spread it out. And as you get used to a machine and a space, it gets easier for you. I mean, if you saw I just lost all my sugar, that wasn't intentional, but we'll just go with it. Okay? Now we're going to go for the final bit where we can cut it. We're going to make it to those 2 of those things wide, 8 inches wide. So it's going to be 2 kouign-amann by 7 kouign-amann. So it's going to be, I'm just going to measure it with that thing where I'm getting 7 in the width. I think I'm really close here right now. Let's see. So I'm about 10 right now, so that's perfect. Now I'm going to flip it again. So I want that seam up. And if you see the edges are kind of doing this on you, once again, you're the boss, you know? So you can make it happen. You just got to figure out a way to make it work. And so what I do is I just roll it. You saw I just rolled this piece and this piece, nothing else. All right, so now I'm going to get back with this and show you. We've got 2 wide by about 3. So we've got to go to 7. So that's going to be a little bit longer than the size of that sill pad. And at this point, whoa, of course, I'm still not used to this thing. All right, there we go.
Okay.
My bad. All right, so now I'm going to measure it. So it's about 2 all the way down. So then we're going to go for 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we're right there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this whole thing and pick it up. Put it right here. I'm not going to be able to show you guys every single step on this. But I'm going to show you how I cut it and then how I put it into the ring of 1. And I weigh out every single time. I weigh it out into 30 grams. Hey, Zach, you mind handing me those rings, please? Yes.
You got it.
Let's just put it right on top of here. Thank you, sir. And then I have my scale. If you look at it, I've taken plastic wrap and I've covered the top of it. You don't want your sugar in your scale. That thing will last a couple of weeks if you let it get in there, and you'll be wondering why you've already have to buy a new scale. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4. It's pretty close. I'm going to have to stretch it a little bit more by hand, I think, it looks like. 4, 5, 6, 7. So we're right on right there. So what I like to do is the length first. I didn't do it when we were practicing earlier, but this is what I like to do in the shop. I have a position in the shop that I like to stand, and this is just, it feels weird because this isn't that position. Usually it's at the end of the table. All right, so this is 4, 7. There we go. This is much better than what we did earlier. So we've got our nice squares. Okay. And I'm just going to show you one of them, and I'm going to show you one of them with raspberries. You mind grabbing me 2 raspberries would be perfect? Mm-hmm. Frozen's fine even. All right. So I'm going to 130 grams. So I'm about 113, and I've still got a lot of this dough. So what I'm going to do to include the layers, instead of just putting big old pieces of it, I'm separating it, and I'm putting it on there. So we've got one here, ready to go. It's about 27, 127, 130, so 1. And then here's the second one, 119, 128, it's 130. Okay, so now you're going to see what I'm going to do. So let's say that we just left this out longer and it's soft. Just pretend that it's soft because that's when you do it the best. I mean, you can still do when it's frozen, but I much prefer, because it's going to break down a lot better when it's not frozen. I'll put one in the middle and then one on the top. And then, you want a pan over here, sir? I'm going to show you how I'll put them in. So I'm going to stretch the corners. And then for me, it took me a long time. Don't let this deceive you looking at me and seeing me do it really easy. You bring the corners up really smooth into the middle, and then you take it and you press it directly in the middle. That's going to be the thing that's going to keep it from jumping out, is that last little push in the middle. And that's basically that. I'm going to bring this to the other table and let the guys, if they want to try their hand at it, they can. Whoa. All right. If you want to do it, you can. If you don't, that's fine. All right. So now we're gonna go back to that brush we had and clean this table up a little bit, because the next part of the lamination is gonna be where we're getting ready to shape them. Alrighty. Okay. You ready? All right, now we're ready. We've got 3 sets of lamination done. It's even a little bit firmer than I'd like it to be, but that's okay. So at this point, I'm going to show you how I stretch the stuff. And because it's so cold, I'm going to be able to hop over the step of retarding it one more time. But if you're doing it with a freezer, which I recommend, I think the blast chiller was a little bit too high today. I would retard it one more time in between from what we're doing. All right, so now, I want it to get it to the width of 18, and you'll see why in a minute. Okay, and this is starting to shift. If you see it starting to squeeze out on the bottom, that's the only reason that's happening right now is because we've got parts that are hard and we've got parts that are soft. So it's going to do crazy things until it all softens up, and that's all right for right now. Looks like, I think we're about, say 17. We still got to go a little bit more on there. I'm going to 18 because it fits in the sheet pan perfectly at 18. All right. All right, so it looks like 18 right now. Man. All right, so we're at 18. So now is when I'm going to turn it sideways. I'm going to straighten up those edges once again. Got to make sure that I have my flour on there. It's starting to rip it already. But that's another byproduct of getting too cold. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that pin one more time and I'm going to straighten out the edges. So on every recipe of croissant that you do, at this point, you're going to take it to 5 inches wide. Because we're only doing a 3-time recipe, it's going to be 15 inches long. So it's going to be wider than it is long. So we're at 14, so I got to go down one more. Looks like we're right there. Okay. We're going to go right back on the table. And this is where it gets to be a little bit exact. Okay, so I want it to be exactly 15. It's a little bit longer, so I'm just going to pick it up and let that pull itself back a little bit. All right, so we're at perfect 15, so I'm going 5, I'm going to mark it. 10, I'm going to mark it. Once again on the top, 5 and 10, I'm going to mark it again, and then I'm just going to connect the dots. And at this point, you're going to know very quickly whether you did good lamination or your lamination is just average. This is where it's going to show you. Okay, just give me 1 second and I'll show y'all. And if you look at my Instagram page for the bakery, you'll be able to see a really good photo of this. I'm not sure if this lens is going to be able to pick it up, the layers. But you can see. You see how it almost looks like wood? And that's when you know you've gotten good lamination. If by this point, if you don't have it, it's not going to happen.
That showed up nice on there, Chef. That looks good.
Good. Okay. So now what we're doing is if you look at these, the 2 ones on the side, because they have this point that's not going to be nice and straight, the regular croissants are the most sensitive, and they're the ones that are the most touchy about everything. So I'm going to make those the regular croissants right here. And then these two will be the other two, and it doesn't even matter. So I'm going to go for the width right now. I'm going for 8 inches. 8 inches wide by the length of a sheet pan, which is 25 inches. Okay. Once again, my ruler. Okay, so now we're at, it looks like it's about 7.5, so I'm going to take it down one more notch. And the reason why that I'm taking it to 8 inches wide, because the width of a sheet pan is 16 inches. So as wide as I'm going to do it is this. And actually I have 3, and I'm going to have 1 open sheet pan. And I like my regular croissants to be a little bit wider, so I'm going to take them to 10 actually. So this is only at 7 still. So I'm going to go down one more notch. That looks like 10. That's really, looks like it's right on the mark. Yep. Okay, then now I'm going to turn it sideways, and I'm going to flip it again. And at this point, it's starting to make that football shape. So I'm going to take the little baby rolling pin, roll this, and we're just going to get it to our width. But right now, it's starting to get sticky again, so I really need to, at this point is when they're going to be the most sensitive or the most delicate because they're getting thin. So really make sure that you flour them, because I've had certain points where I was making 24 croissants and I messed up 12 of them, and I was so mad at myself. All right. Thanks, Zach. All right. I'm thinking this is 25 inches. Yep. So now I'm going to take it, and since this is the regular croissant, this one's going to get its own pan, but the other two will not. Okay. Last chili, thank you. Now I can do these two at the same time because they are almost exactly, these are like twins, you know? So there we go with the flour. I'm going to do that edge again that we had, and I'm going to straighten it out. You've got to constantly be mindful about those layers and about straightening everything out. And that's the only way at the end that you're going to get it to be really nice, and it's going to look soigné at the end. All right. So I'm starting around 15 centimeters on this because I know that's about the height. I just know that because I'm doing it so much. Now we're going for 8 inches wide. We're about, I'd say 6. And just be mindful that when you put two croissants like that, when they go through the rolling pin, they're going to separate and they're going to get further away. So one's going to come off the end, so you got to be ready to catch it. All right. So we're at 7 inches. I'm going to put the ruler here so I don't keep going over there. All right. Okay, it's really close. One last notch down, and then we're taking it to 25. So I'm going to take one and leave it over here, and we're going to turn this one to the side. And if they were both center pieces, like if you were doing a 6-time croissant, you could roll 2 of them. But because these two have uneven sides, if you try to do it in there, they're going to get all caught in the edges of the pin. So just do, on the edges, just do one at a time. Okay, now it looks like we're at 25. Yep, so we're a little bit longer, but I'm going to make it fit in there. Okay. So this is going to have just 1/2 of the sheet pan that it can take up, that I'm going to let it. I'm going to lift it a little bit and let it suck itself in there. Okay. Okay. Now we're going to do this one. So I took it down to about 5, so I'm going to go 15, 10, 5 this time, just so I can go really fast. 10. Now we're really going to push it down to 5. Hopefully it goes all right. I think I can go one more notch. It's not looking long enough. All right. It is way too long. That's the nice thing about the Rondo is it's the increments are so much shorter, and this one there's certain points where you can't. All right, but that's okay. I can still make it work. So just remember, if you're going like little increments, it tends to work better at this point. But we'll still be able to work it with this. Just switch with me. I'll take those out and roll croissants. Okay. It's really close. It's close enough to be in there. So now at this point, I'm going to show you the two tools, the three tools actually, that are your best friends making croissants. Small pizza cutter with a very sharp blade. A square. I'll explain to you why I use the square and why is it so valuable. And then once again, the ruler. So now, I've got it 10 inches by about 25. And so every 2 croissants is going to be 5 inches. You'll see the way that I cut it. So I want to bring it to be 35 inches in order to make 14 croissants. So I'm going to say somewhere around 9 is where I'm going to start. I'm going really close to 5 is where I'm looking for. Let's see. I think it's about 32 right now. Yeah, 32, so we're going to 35, so I'm going to go one more notch down. That looks like 35. All right. So now what we're going to do is this is going to be where my croissants are. Looks like it's a little bit longer now. Looks like it's about 38 or something like that. Let's see. Oh yeah. So now I've just got to suck it in a little bit more. And that's why for me, this sheeter would cause me problems because it's not fine enough in the increments at the end. So I would have to do too much fudge work at the end. All right, so now I've got it. And if you look at the ruler, I'm going to show you exactly why I have this and why it's so valuable. If you want to be consistent, what I did, I don't know if you've noticed, when I laid this down, there are seams in this table where the wood is connected. These are nice and straight and they're square to the end. And the same reason why I have this is I'm going to square it to the end of the table. Okay? So you want a little bit of overhang, and I'm going to make my mark on either side. Then I'm going to take this, and this is where I'm going to use that square. So I'm going to use the square here and take it to right here. And I know that my croissants are going to be really even because I've got that square to the table. Same thing with this side. Square it to the table. So now it's okay to cut. Now these, it doesn't matter as much because by eye you can just say, okay, I'm going to get it to that line. I just want to cut off the very ends, because your lamination is going to start smearing at those ends. And truthfully, what I do with these, with my scraps, is I cut them all up and I put them in the freezer in a container. And when I make ball stock, that's my ball stock right there. Okay. So now you can see we've got a really nice and exact rectangle. Okay. So look, every 5 inches, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. So every one of those rectangles, we're going to get 2 croissants, and you'll see how I do it. I do it a little bit different than some places because I like to get as much croissants as I can out of it. My croissants may not be as perfect as some other places in California, New York, but I do it on purpose so that I can use all of the dough. Okay, so now I'm going to just go one way. Don't try to do one and then switch it. This goes a lot faster if you're just cutting it straight down. I'm connecting the dots. Can I get that same paintbrush just washed again so I can put it in the egg wash?
Sure.
Thank you. All right, so now we've gotten this. Now we're going to connect the corners. So we're making right triangles, right? And you're probably looking at like, what the heck? So how's he going to make croissants out of this that are isosceles triangles? Well, you'll see. Just give me a sec. Okay, so then I'm going to set myself up where they're all facing the same way. So I'm going to do 3 at a time on here, 3 in each row basically. And then you'll see my next step, the only thing that I can really tell you to do is going to be practice, because this step is going to take a little bit of practice. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and straighten them all. I'm going to make them all isosceles triangle where it's equal angles on either side. So look at that. Just did it. Boom. So instead of losing a whole croissant at the end of the day, we haven't lost it and we've used all that scrap for ball stock. So no waste at all. Okay. It's not going to be exact, but it's going to be really close. And that's the other thing. You can tell Maman that they're a handmade product. They're beautiful, yes, but they're not so perfect that you're like, man, did a machine make that or did a person? Okay. And I'm stretching it a little bit, not an insane amount. I don't want to break all my layers. So now just on the tips, I'm going to put egg wash. And just one brush full of egg wash is more than enough. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to roll it up. So the first thing I do is I roll it up like this. And then this is going to be practice as well. You're going to be kicking yourself on the shape, but eventually after you do a bunch of them, you'll get it. So what I'm doing is I'm pinning those tips with my 2 side fingers right here. So I made a really nice shaped croissant. Could go a little bit more in the middle, but that's okay. So once again, the tips. And I want to make sure that when I stop, that directly in the center underneath is that tip. So it's right there, so that when it starts opening up and it shows that, like, I mean, you almost call it like a mohawk. When you see all those layers come up like this, that's part of the beauty of it. Okay.
Now, on an average weekend, how many croissants do you sell at your shop, Jeff?
So what we do is when I do it on machine, I do it in batches, 6-time batch. And my croissants are a little bit, the dough is a little bit smaller than this. So it's, I get 12 in every recipe. So for me in the shop, I go through 2 of those 6s every Saturday. So that's 288 croissants every Saturday, but that's a mixture of different things, and it's also included morning buns, sticky buns, snails, and that's included an almond croissant, pistachio, raspberry croissants. Just depending on the week, we have all kind of different stuff. Sometimes I do one with a red layer on the outside that's a raspberry. Sometimes I do just all kind of different things. Okay, so then we've gotten that. And at this point, you don't need a proofer retarder. Yes, that's awesome if you have a proofer retarder. I mean, that's amazing, but you don't need one to make beautiful croissants. I just take it like this, and I just start proofing. They're ready to proof, and I'll let them at room temperature, 71 degrees for 5 hours, and then they're ready to be cooked, just like we talked about in the beginning. Okay, so now the next one we're going to do is the snails. All right, so I need the raspberry pastry cream and the currants, and also that too. Yes, thank you. Oh. Okay, so now for this step, chef's knife, the offset spatula, and one of my favorite things is these little scoop spatulas. You'll see why I like it so much in a minute. And then once again, the ruler. Okay, exact. Okay, so if you look at these in here, they are 24 inches long. And so in order for me to get 14, it needs to be 28 inches long. This is stuck a little bit in here just because of not having space in there. If I would have let it go much further in the blast chiller, I wouldn't have been able to even take them apart. All right. So now we have that, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn around. Just put it in the fridge, yeah, that's fine. I'm going to turn around and put it right back in that sheeter. Well, it's 25. I mean, at these points, especially with it all bunched up, I'm going to go ahead and take the rolling pin and see how I can get it. Let's see. So we're at 24, 26. Okay. And you just want to be nice and even. That's the biggest thing on whenever you're rolling anything with a rolling pin on yourself. You put even pressure all the way across. I'm not putting any more pressure at any point. Okay, so I'm at 28 there. I'm gonna flip it over. I want that end over here to be furthest away from me, and you'll see exactly why I'm doing this in a second. Just a little bit more. Okay. Then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my rolling pin and I'm gonna pinch this edge. And that's gonna be where I'm putting my egg wash. So now I'm gonna make a little yellow brick road of egg wash right here, going right along that edge. That's my glue. Okay, now I'm going to do pastry cream. This is just too high. I don't weigh it out. And this is exactly why I like to use this in conjunction with that little offset spatula, because you can scoop it and spread it all in one. We use this technique for all kinds of different things. Like when we do our king cakes is a little bit different style. We do something really similar to this. Okay. So we've got that, and now I'm going to take this pastry cream and I'm just going to smooth it all out to where it's nice and even. Granted, if your croissant dough is a little bit more even from the beginning, and you can go in those small increments, it'll be nice and smooth all the way across. The reason why I'm not as smooth is because the croissant dough is kind of wavy after we shrunk it in a little bit. That's all right, it'll work. Okay. Now we're going to do craisins on there. And I'm looking over here and I've just got to make sure it goes to the edge, because you want everybody to get the same amount of pastry cream. Okay. Now the craisins, I'm going to just put as many as you think you want, but just remember, this is 14 of them, so you want to put a good bit. And some of these are stuck because I guess they cut them in half and pitted it or whatever. All right. And you got to remember, these two edges are going to be underneath. Everything else doesn't matter. This will already be underneath, and you'll see exactly what I do when I put it underneath and how it gets that really nice snail, where you can still see the layers.
Chef, do you do savory versions of this at your shop?
I haven't, but it's a great idea. I mean, you could do like a bechamel in there and do, I don't know, bacon and chives. You could do, you could do little bits of cheddar. I mean, there's so many things you could do. It's endless. You can do a chocolate one. I've done a chocolate one with candied oranges in there before. I mean, it's endless. As creative as you can be is what it can be. I like to just do seasonal stuff. So whenever it's Satsuma season, we go right into the Satsuma one with the golden raisins. For me, that's my favorite one because that's the first one we did, but it's just, that Satsuma flavor just, man, is awesome. All right. So then at this point, I'm going to take the whole thing and I'm going to start rolling it. But I want to leave a little bit of gap in the middle because if you don't leave a gap, what's going to happen is it's going to be like a spring where it's just going to come out the middle just like this, and you really don't want that. Okay. So now I'm getting it to lock to that. You can see how the glue just glued it, the egg wash. So now I'm going to set it on there. It's 8 inches between each one. I'm going to take the knife and every 2 inches I'm going to mark it. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, yada, yada, yada. 6. That's fine. And now I'm going to go through and cut them. You want to use a really saw motion. You don't want to be squishing this. You want to be using that blade. Okay. So now I'm going to set them all up to how I think they're going to be in the pan. And remember, those 2 edges facing down. So we've got those 2 rounded edges are going to be facing down. Okay? One more. Yeah, that'll be good. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to show you how I get that shape. So yeah, I glued it. I'm not just going to take it and put it like this, because if you do that, it's just going to just open all the way up by the time it cooks. So I'm going to take this little flap and put it halfway, where half of that point is sticking, and I've got my thumb in between, and that's going to be what makes that shape. It's a little bit messy sticking your thumb in there and everything, but it's all right. I mean, it's pastry cream. Okay.
That's part of the fun, is getting a little bit messy.
Absolutely.
Right?
Got to use your senses. Get that tactile pastry cream. You know it's good. All right, so we're just going to finish up the last few, and then this is just the same as the regular croissants, but the baking is a little bit different. So it is, instead of 360, it's 340 for 20 minutes. Then as soon as that goes off, don't open your oven. Turn it down to 325 and go for another 5 minutes. And then if you're going to glaze it, take it out, glaze it, and then put it right back in the oven for a really short time, for like 2 to 5 minutes, just to get that beautiful glaze to set. And then the regular croissant is 360 for 17 minutes, and then as soon as it beeps, turn it down to 330 for another 8 minutes. And that's that. I think that's everything, huh?
That's everything.
You want to just show all the stuff we've got?
Yeah.
All right, now we're just going to show y'all everything that we just made. And of course, I mean, I just went to show you that it's almost limitless, the amount of stuff that you can do with croissant dough. And in France, they like it to show it upside down, but I don't know, you're not showing off those beautiful layers you just made if you don't. And that's it. And we'll go back to talking about making doughs in a couple of minutes. Anything you'd like to say, Zach? I'm going to wash my hands real quick.
Yeah, you had a couple, you reminded us to remind you about why you split the croissant and stacked it on top of the butter when you first started your lamination. When you're incorporating the butter, you have the edges sticking out and you cut them off and stack them on top.
Yes.
Instead of folding it over.
Okay, so when we're talking about those edges, when we make that football shape, if you allow it from the very beginning, it causes this pressure point when those points that you fold over, and we've cut that out, and it makes it to where it wants to go more straight. And if you do 3 turns and you allow every single turn that you do included in the beginning, to not have that, and when you lock it, you're going to have a football no matter what you do, and you're going to have developed so much gluten that it's going to be impossible to not do it. And that's the secret of doing that. And that's why even some of the guys, when you do it, you see them do it, they make the turn, and then they cut the edges. It's exactly that reason.
Just relieving that pressure on there.
Exactly, that's it.
Great. How long do you let their dough rest in between every fold?
In between every fold, when I do it, I do what I call a set. And when I do sets, because I do cooling them on and I do croissants separately, I do every turn, there's a 15-minute break. So basically it goes into the top of the freezer with those two things like this. And if the freezer is cold enough within 15 minutes, that's going to give you enough. And you've got to get used to that touch. You don't want it to be frozen. You want it to still be elastic, but you don't want it to be so soft where it's sticky and everything. And that's kind of that tightrope that you walk. And just as you do it, you're going to get better and better at it. You say, okay, and a lot of times by mistakes, like I was struggling with croissants for a really long time, regular croissants, and I was getting like, oh man, every time that they would collapse inside. And I was like, what's going on? And so one day I had somebody else cooking croissants, and she made a mistake in the oven. Something happened with the oven, and they came out, and I'm like, what happened? They're perfect. How did you do that? So for 30 minutes, I'm like interrogating her, trying to figure out how she got perfect croissants. And it was the temperature, the way that I've done, where I cook it really hot and high in the beginning, and then in the very end, you just take the outside and you crisp it up, and you get a little bit of brownness, and it finishes cooking the inside without overcooking it. I'll go back over the dough. When you make the dough, the first thing that I do is I have that butter, that BEP. Butter and pommade is what it is in French, and it's just soft butter. And what we do is I have a microwave in the shop, and the only thing that we use the microwave for is to melt butter and a few other things of warming water, and that's it. And so what we do is we put it in the microwave for like 20 seconds, and then when we've got everything in there, all the dry stuff, the salt, the sugar, the instant yeast and everything, I take it in with a paddle, and I paddle just to coat the butter all around all of that dough, so it helps inhibit gluten. And the other thing that it does, it helps increase elasticity. And the other thing that you do to help increase elasticity is, once I've gotten that and I've done that, and I mix it for 2 minutes, and so that the butter is all in there, then I pour in the liquid. Well, with this one it's going to be pouring in the pool louche and the liquid at the same time. I'm going to put my S-hook, and I'm going to let it go for 16 minutes to really develop that elasticity, so that when it grows like this, that it just doesn't rip and just tear into a whole bunch of pieces. And I mean, that's pretty much how you make that dough. It's quite different than some other doughs you make. And then what I like to do is I wrap it into that rectangle like you saw, and I like to leave it in the fridge, retarding overnight. And so by the end of it, I've had 3 days being relaxing in the fridge, and fermentation, it develops the flavor like you wouldn't believe.
Chef, do we want to do cut open, do a cross section of your croissant?
Yeah, let's do a
show that
cross-section,
off?
yeah.
That's great.
You
Top
need a
drawer.
serrated knife, yeah?
Yeah, I've got a little serrated. Should be pretty
Right there.
handy right there. Little guy.
You want to
Well,
do
it's
the
you. I
honors?
mean, your hard work, Chef. We're gonna let
You do the honors.
Okay.
Come on, man.
All
Just
right.
be gentle.
So,
This is when you know if it's a good croissant. Those are right up
yeah.
there.
So what you're looking for is exactly this.
They call it
can
a
see that.
honeycomb
Just
structure, and that is exactly what that is.
The spiral honeycomb you can see. And I know there's a pastry chef, I know you probably follow Dominic Ansel, but he's got shops all over the world. And she shared a post one day, and they do this at his shop in Tokyo, he's got one in London.
He's got cameras watching them do it, and
New
they
York
just
and
show them,
LA,
okay,
and
this is how they came out
and
today.
this is
exactly.
what they do every day. They send a cross section of all of their croissants back to him every single day. So that's how he can maintain quality control over the whole, across the world really, from
And if
London to Tokyo.
you're ever in New York, I highly encourage you to go into a Supermoon Bakehouse.
Supermoon,
And
yeah.
they always have their sous chefs in there shaping their croissants. And you think that I go kind of crazy about shaping them? They go like to another level.
Great. So, thank you, Chef, for everything. Thank you for showing us all your technique. It's really amazing. It's like I said, it's usually we've done a few of these classes, and usually I'm kind of right in there. But this one, I know when I recognize that when I need to just step out of the way and let the person who does this every single day show us exactly what he does best. And it's really really an honor to have you here, and great to see your beautiful product. And thanks for sharing it with us.